generative AI tools consuming more energy than your traditional ways of looking up things? And what kind of real environmental harm do these generative AI tools can do?
Climate change being one of the biggest challenges that our planet faces. There's potentially very bad effects, but also potentially some great things that can happen.
Hello and welcome to Technocracy. I am Heena Goswami, editorial consultant with IGPP, Institute for Governance, Policies and Politics, New Delhi. In this year's AI Summit, held in Paris, one theme dominated the discourse around AI. The discourse related to the sustainability of AI systems. Secretary General of the United Nations highlighted that AI power-intensive systems are already placing an unsustainable strain on our planet. This discussion around the sustainability of AI system emanates from the rising environmental cost of AI. Did you know that every ChatGPT prompt consumes roughly 10 times the energy used for a typical Google search? According to the International Energy Agency, data centers worldwide consume between 2% and 3% of the world's total electricity. This figure is expected to rise significantly, with some projections estimating that it could double by 2030. The environmental footprint of AI system isn't confined to server farms humming quietly in the background. It starts with training massive models using supercomputers that run for weeks, often drawing on fossil fuel-based electricity grids. Alongside electricity, these systems consume staggering amount of water. Google's data center reportedly consume over 500,000 liters of water daily just to keep their cooling systems running. The amount of water that could meet the daily water needs with a town with tens of thousands of population. What also lies hidden from the view is the material layer of AI. Building and maintaining these technologies depend on critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, and rare earth elements mined in regions where extraction is energy intensive and regulation is often weak. These aren't renewable resources, and their extraction frequently carries steep social and environmental cost. One must also remember that not all regions are impacted equally. The development of generative AI relies on a global supply chain, one that disproportionately burdens the global south. While most data centers are based in the US and parts of Europe, the raw material as well as the water and energy used to support these systems are often drawn from elsewhere. In Chile's Atacama Desert, communities have raised alarm about the impact of lithium mining on water availability. In Arizona, local water shortages have been worsened by sprawling AI infrastructure built by major cloud providers. These regions, already vulnerable to climate change, are now on the front lines of powering tools that may never directly benefit them. To mitigate such problems, the United Nations and UNESCO have both called for a right-based approach to digital infrastructure, stressing the importance of environmental justice. The digital divide today is not just about access to bandwidth, but it's also about who carries the environmental debt of a technology that claims to serve all. What is even more concerning is how little public visibility there is into how these decisions are made. Most AI companies do not disclose their compute usage or energy consumption. There's no global standard requiring them to report environmental impact and no binding framework to ensure public interest is protected. What we are witnessing is a profound democratic shortfall. A few tech companies, unelected and unaccountable, are deciding the environmental trajectory of technology that billions of people use. And the public, is largely shut out of the conversation. Consider the EU's AI Act, often hailed as the most progressive legislation of its kind. While it goes far in protecting human rights, algorithmic fairness, and transparency, it stops short of introducing binding environmental obligations. The omission is telling and troubling. It leaves us with a pressing ethical question. Should private innovation be allowed to shape our collective climate future without democratic guardrails? So far, national and international efforts have struggled to keep up. The UN's 2024 Global Digital Compact only briefly mentions the environmental impact of AI. The G20's Digital Economy Working Group has focused more on economic growth and digital inclusion than on sustainability. The truth is, governance remains several steps behind technological momentum, and in the race to innovate, we risk sliding backwards on climate goals. It is also unclear how AI fits into climate commitments. Countries around the world have pledged net zero emissions under the Paris Agreement, and the UN's Sustainable Development Goal 13 calls for urgent climate action. But current policies rarely account for the massive and growing carbon draw for AI infrastructure. Even companies that see themselves as leaders in climate action often don't match their AI growth with real limits on environmental impact. Most keep expanding without a clear understanding of the planet's environmental limits or the basic ethical responsibilities they should bear. And so we must ask, can artificial intelligence really be climate compatible without robust oversight? The answer may lie in reimagining how we build and deploy these technologies. There's a growing movement advocating for what is called as green AI, models that are smaller, less energy hungry, and trained with sustainability in mind. Innovations in lower power chips and decentralized learning systems are helping reduce dependence on massive cloud infrastructure. But these solutions will only be effective if they are backed by public policy and civic engagement. Governments, particularly at the city and regional levels, can regulate how and where data centers are built, what kind of energy they draw, and how much water they are allowed to use. To further deliberate on the environmental cost of AI, today we are joined by Mr. Konstantin Klemmer. Mr. Klemmer is a machine learning researcher and engineer at LGND AI. His research focuses on the representation of geospatial phenomena in machine learning methods, and more broadly on statistical machine learning and self-supervised representation learning. Beyond that, he is interested in the applications of these methods in urban environments and to tackle climate change. Previously, he also volunteered for Climate Change AI.
Welcome to Technocracy, and I'm so glad we could make this work. To my first question, it's regular for us to read sensational articles about ChatGPT. One prompt consumed so much energy and it could fulfill the needs of this and that. So how true are these claims about generative AI tools consuming more energy than your traditional ways of looking up things? And what kind of real environmental harm do these generative AI tools can do to the environment?
Yeah, so the unfortunate answer is we don't know exactly the extent of the energy use, of the water use, of all of these things of generative AI, because there's just very little documentation about this. The companies that build these models and the companies that run data centers don't publish a lot of information about this. And so it is hard for us to say. But what is undeniable is that we're seeing a massive increase in the construction of new data centers and in the demand for compute, especially GPU compute that is required for running these models, and then also kind of associated effects, right? So I think water use is mentioned. That's like a very big one. And yeah, so we have data on basically the increase in data center utilization, also the construction of new data centers, and we have some data on the prevalence of generative AI models and chatbots, and a lot of people using them. But it is really hard to say kind of the exact effects because of all of this. What we can say is there is an effect, and uh, something that's clearly observable, but the exact extents are unclear. And so, yeah, if you wanted to kind of advocate for something, what we at Climate Change I advocate for is more transparency around this, and that goes from like open sourcing the models themselves, where you kind of learn a bit more about what data was used to train them, what hardware was used to train them, which kind of gives us a bit of an insight in kind of approximating the energy use. To then kind of the bigger companies who run data centers, providing more transparency.
In how we read news, like articles around, let's say, ChatGPT or Grok would catch the attention of people, so they are, made more sensational. But these are all Gen AI tools. Do we have any studies and on about Gen AI tools that we know some energy is consumed, some extra energy is consumed, but also a lot of energy goes into training these large language models, which starts like, much earlier. But what about other applications of AI? Do we have studies, or is there some transparency there on what kind of harm do they cause, other applications of AI cause to the environment? Or in a sense, in a cost benefit analysis, like, is the pursuit of AI worth it?
Yeah, I think that's a super interesting question. And again, I think in order to have a bit of a better idea about this, we just need first better measurements in the first place. And yeah, so the equation is constantly changing. I think we've kind of moved a bit away from this kind of older paradigm where we would say, oh, training the generative AI model is very energy extensive and very, bad for the environment. But once that is done, it actually is much easier and not so, it doesn't use a lot of energy. So that was kind of the argument a few years ago when these tools first emerged. The argument has changed quite a bit, because what has happened alongside this scaling of training of models is so-called inference scaling. So that is, I think, a good example for this is the kind of chain of thought that modern large language models deploy, which basically means that instead of kind of producing one answer to a given user query, you produce a bunch of answers that are chained together to produce a better output and give the user a better experience. And obviously that longer and stepwise output leads to more compute needed. So nowadays we actually can't even say that, the training is energy intensive and afterwards these tools are very efficient. The inference has gotten extremely efficient, has gotten extremely energy intensive too. And yeah, so that's the one point. On your question of cost benefit, so this is, I'm super interested in this question, and I think to answer this, we kind of need to look into which areas in science and specifically in climate can benefit from use of AI. And there's a whole bunch of different areas where we see quite a lot of potential for AI to actually help reduce emissions and also help with climate change adaptation, so adapt to the big changes that are coming to our planet from climate change. And just to name a few examples here, in like very complex systems like energy grids, AI can be used to help optimize things, kind of, for example, spread grid load better and make things more efficient. So that's an application of AI where we can potentially save a lot of energy by just making our grid systems more efficient. Another application where I see a lot of potential of AI is material discovery, right? So we mostly hear about AI in medicine and in biology, stuff like AlphaFold, so kind of protein folding has become very popular. But there's a lot of kind of applications that are in kind of a similar area of material discovery that have great potential, right? So we might be able to use AI to find better carbohydrate compounds to help us build better tools, machinery that's more efficient. One very kind of, again, focus on the energy future example is the construction of fusion generators. So fusion energy requires obviously materials that can last in very extreme temperatures, and AI can potentially help us discover those. And yeah, you're right. If these kind of promises come true, then AI might have a very positive impact on climate change, and then all of this compute and all of these emissions will be worth it. But again, I have to advocate for, in order for us to understand this cost-benefit equation better, we need numbers. And it's not that we need kind of exact numbers for everything, but it's the kind of numbers we're working with are so vague, and the estimates are so vague that they don't really allow us to make these cost benefit analysis. And no one expects precise numbers, especially on things that we cannot forecast, right? We cannot forecast how effective we're going to be in stuff like material discovery with AI. But yeah, I think there's some more regulation coming on transparency. I think especially in the EU that is talking a lot about this. So hopefully there will be a step in this direction. And yeah, just any like better documentation of how AI is used and what the use cases are and in which way they contribute to climate change and in which in which ways they potentially help us tackle climate change.
What we also know about how AI is being developed and deployed, that 90% of AI patents and investment are concentrated in top 5 countries.
Yeah.
And, it takes me back to the Industrial Revolution. I mean, it does not take me personally back, but let's look at how history unfolded. And we know that the global north was the first to industrialize, develop. And now they are asking countries in the third world to also lower emissions, when we can all agree that their contribution to polluting the environment was not as much, right? Do you think this, I mean, this is a rather speculative question, but do you think this cycle could also be repeated with AI technologies, that at the moment data centers are being set up in Europe and US, and they're consuming a lot of energy, they are very consuming a lot of water, right? And uh, leading to emission and everything. And do you think the developed countries are again going to, they reach a certain point of development and they are going to ask others to cut emissions?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I 100% agree. This is like an echo of history, I guess, once more. And yeah, I think there's also this excuse of abandoning like climate goals because you have this promise of AI and this use of AI as a silver bullet. Oh, we actually don't need to worry about this anymore because AI will solve all our problems. And I think, yeah, this is like a very Western and kind of techno-optimist perspective that I certainly don't agree with. And yeah, I think what we can all do to help like tackle these narratives is to treat AI development as a global community effort and support efforts within all countries and nations to build AI systems and kind of help empower their populations. I think the best example is just have AI be better at all sorts of different languages and not just English. That's kind of very democratizing effect. But then when it comes to kind of specifically deploying AI for supporting actually tackling climate change, climate change obviously manifests very differently in different countries. And I'm again worried that if we kind of build AI into our ways of tackling climate change, both adaptation and mitigation, we might over focus on applications in Western nations when countries are so differently affected. So I think it's important we kind of create active narratives around this and tell people that this is what's happening and that and then also engage in kind of community building efforts, provide resources to developing all sorts of countries, right, who have ambitions in this space, provide the education, and yeah, make it very clear that currently the West is kind of going ahead again with a bunch of kind of energy consumption and yeah, building more data center infrastructure, and which leads to, on the one hand, pollution, but on the other hand, them mostly reaping the economic benefits. I think, there's some promising signs. I think a lot of more countries have kind of stepped in and kind of tried to develop their own AI landscape. I don't know, just this week, I think we had this OpenAI announcement of like specific subscription tiers in India, actually, which, you know, obviously they're not doing this out of goodwill, right? They probably see some profit incentive there, but still, it's probably something that the AI ecosystem in India can leverage, and maybe also into some cool AI applications for tackling climate change.
I would also add that some technologies, such as the ones predicting floods or hurricanes or, possibly droughts, they should be like easy to transfer, and countries should be more willing to share them with the countries of global south, because I mean that would give a better assessment of what the extent of climate change, and it would, I mean, it does not hurt anyone, right? um
Yeah.
Also,
So, oh, sorry.
no, no, please.
No, that's because so now we're going into my like actual more my actual research topics, which is around geospatial AI and, among other things, the kind of transferability of AI models from one region to another. And so I agree with you to some degree. I think there is, to some degree, that's we can really build like if we build a good flood model in one area, other areas can also benefit from it. I would caveat this a little bit, saying that different countries have different kind of phenomena, like different types of floodings, and so it's usually not a perfect fit. But I think this is like a good example of where kind of multi-country global effort would benefit everyone, right? Because kind of the more you learn about different ways in which, for example, floods manifest, different ways they can happen, the better your flood prediction model is, right? And learns these and can learn these edge cases, and then you actually, get to a world in which these models transfer better around the world. And so, yeah, this is a great example of the benefits of multi-country collaboration in AI development.
And also now you're hearing of heat waves in Germany, in England, and I feel like you can learn from the global south, or applies, instead of focusing on technologies that are going to come, you can learn from some of the lived experiences of the global south and understand how to build better in order to protect oneself from the changing climate.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more on like learning from other countries. And I think you also get to a point that is crucially important, and that is that, yes, AI can in many ways contribute to tackling climate change, but it will always just be part of any strategy and any solution. It will not solve climate change by itself. And it's sometimes a bit easy to fall for like really technological solutions, and they seem very promising, and they'll get a lot of hype and a lot of investment from industry, but in many ways kind of the boring old school strategies towards tackling climate change will remain incredibly important, and no matter whether we advance AI or not, a lot of kind of traditional strategies around that will remain at the forefront.
True. Now to your point where we know that there's not a lot of transparency from big techs about what kind of energy, what is the extent of energy they are consuming, and there needs to be more transparency. Do you think we also need to come up with some kind of binding regulation kind of system where one, they are required to report the kind of energy they are consuming, and also they are required to maybe tweak their technologies or application in a way that causes the least harm to environment, instead of profit maximization always being the goal, because profit is profiting only one company, while environment is for all of us.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm a bit more hesitant on advocating like specifically for specific regulation or policy. The ones that I am really strongly in favor for are regulations or policies on transparency and documentation. And then the other thing you mentioned, I think, is very interesting. The kind of it's getting to the where do you put your data centers, data center location, profit maximizing objective versus, let's say, sustainability maximizing. I think that is very interesting because we see data centers popping up at locations that are maybe very cheap energy-wise, but for example, like water, or you have like other kind of pollution effects. And I think that could be one thing where regulation could be helpful. And this is very kind of and we have blueprints for this, right? This is very similar to kind of environmental standards for other industries that are kind of required to follow certain environmental guidelines or include these objectives in their kind of location assessment, for example. That will probably happen, but just like with any AI regulation and policy, the governments are just kind of far behind the actual innovation that is happening, and so kind of still in a regulatory Wild West, where regulators kind of desperately try to catch up to the latest innovation and to the latest development. I think though, specifically for like, let's say, energy infrastructure, we actually that's somewhat detached from AI, right? So we can maybe regulate that in a different way where we don't focus on AI, but like focus on the data centers themselves and on resource usage. But yeah, I think that question is very difficult, and I'm also not a policy expert, but any kind of world in which we have more discussions about this and this becomes more present is a good world.
So, during my research, I found that data centers were being set up in Arizona, which is already a water scarce country, water scarce region. And then I feel it's not an AI problem, it's a problem of regulation of governments working together to, ensure or to decide like what can be set up where according to needs of not just the big techs who are investing, but also the communities that inhabit those areas. So that is all. These are all the questions I have. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for this very insightful conversation.
Yeah, thank you much, and thanks for bringing more attention to this topic. It's super interesting, and I don't know, we're just at the kind of in the early stages of thinking about this intersection of climate change and AI, just because AI is just emergent as a phenomenon. But with climate change being one of the biggest challenges that our planet faces, we really have to kind of continuously think about this and about these interactions, and we cannot kind of let things slide through all the AI hype. It's important that we kind of pay attention to this because there's potentially very bad effects, but also potentially some great things that can happen. So yeah, thanks for bringing attention to this topic.
If you enjoyed watching this episode of Technocracy, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. For more AI related conversation, you can also watch IGPP Expert Talks AI Special Series.